The air itself seemed to hum with a nervous energy, a low thrumming beneath the polished veneer of political decorum. Overhead, the camera lights buzzed with an almost predatory intensity, casting a stark, unforgiving glow upon the stage floor, which gleamed with the polish of anticipation. Behind it all, a massive red, white, and blue backdrop didn't just display patriotism, it screamed it, a silent, defiant roar in a room packed with the party faithful. This was the first night of the GOP Unity Forum, a televised spectacle meticulously designed to showcase bridge building, a carefully curated display of harmony between the rising stars and the entrenched veterans of the Republican Party. But beneath the surface, a different current flowed, a silent, building pressure that no one, not even the most seasoned political operative, truly expected to erupt into the storm it became. In the controlled quiet of the green room, Karoline Leavitt, a mere 27 years old, yet possessing a fearlessness that belied her youth, adjusted the mic pin on her crisp white blouse. Her movements were precise, deliberate. She wasn't rehearsing her lines because she needed practice. She was sharpening the edge of every single word, honing them into weapons. She was the very embodiment of the Republican base's future. Fiercely loyal to Donald Trump, unapologetically conservative in every fiber of her being, and dangerously, devastatingly articulate. Her mission tonight transcended mere conversation. Her job, as she saw it, was not just to talk, it was to draw blood. Down the hall, in a separate, equally sterile space, Liz Cheney sipped from a bottle of water. Her posture was upright, as unyielding and rigid as her principles. Her mind, though calm, held a cautious edge. For her, this wasn't a debate, not in the traditional sense. It was an obligation, a solemn duty to remind the audience, and indeed the entire nation, that principle still mattered, that not every Republican had to kiss the ring of Mar-a-Lago. She had faced down worse, she reasoned, than a Gen Z firebrand. Or so she thought. The producers, in their meticulous planning, had committed a grave, almost prophetic mistake. They had placed Karoline Leavitt and Liz Cheney side by side, the final panel of the night. It was an oversight that would soon detonate into a political earthquake. As Karoline walked toward the backstage curtain, her heels tapping a rhythmic, almost martial beat on the tile floor, her campaign manager leaned in, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Remember, you're not here to play nice. You're here to finish what Trump started." Karoline simply nodded, a tight, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Oh," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I'm not just going to win. I'm going to make sure she never forgets tonight." The studio audience, a buzzing hive of conservative influencers, political junkies, and red state donors, vibrated with anticipation in their seats. A hush fell as the announcer's voice boomed, echoing through the room. "Please welcome Congresswoman Liz Cheney and White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt." A polite, almost perfunctory applause broke out. Liz walked in first, her gait steady, reserved, a picture of controlled composure. Karoline followed, her eyes, sharp and unwavering, locked onto her opponent like a hawk circling its prey, a predator assessing its mark. The moderator, oblivious to the impending tempest, opened with the night's central question. "Tonight we discuss the soul of the GOP. Unity or truth? Can the two coexist?" Karoline leaned forward slightly, her smile tight, almost a grimace. Truth, she thought, is about to punch unity in the mouth. The moderator's question hung in the charged air, a fragile bridge between the two women poised for battle. Liz Cheney took the microphone first, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. Her voice, when it came, was measured, controlled, a tone honed by years of speaking from a place of legacy, from the hallowed halls of power. "I believe the Republican Party must return to its constitutional roots," she began, her gaze sweeping across the audience, a practiced, almost academic delivery. "Not to a personality cult, not to rage politics. We must be the party of principle again." There were nods, scattered and tentative from some corners of the crowd, a few older faces acknowledging her words with quiet approval. But many others remained stiff, unmoving, their eyes fixed, watching, waiting for the true spectacle to begin. They were not here for a lecture on constitutional law. They were here for the fight. Karoline Leavitt didn't blink. Her gaze remained locked on Cheney, a laser focus that betrayed no emotion, no impatience. She let Liz finish, every word, every carefully constructed phrase. She even paused a beat longer, letting the silence stretch, taut and thin between them. It wasn't politeness, it was pure, unadulterated strategy. It was the silence before impact, the calm before the storm. Then, slowly, deliberately, she leaned into her mic. Her voice, when it finally cut through the air, was not loud, but it was sharp, clean, like a scalpel. "With all due respect, Congresswoman," Karoline began, and a low ripple, almost imperceptible at first, moved through the audience. It was the sound of collective breath being held. Karoline's eyes remained locked on Cheney, unflinching, unwavering. "The Republican Party didn't abandon its principles," she stated, her words landing with the force of a hammer blow. "You abandoned its people." The ripple in the crowd intensified, a low murmur growing, a collective gasp of recognition. "You voted to impeach the president who gave working-class Americans a voice again," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet, relentless power. "You sided with the same media elites who called us deplorables. And now you want unity?" The accusation hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown. Liz Cheney straightened her back, a subtle, almost imperceptible stiffening of her spine. She blinked once, slowly, absorbing the direct hit. "I sided with the Constitution, Ms. Leavitt," she countered, her voice regaining some of her earlier steel, a defensive parry. But Karoline didn't miss a beat. She was already moving, already pressing the attack. "Funny, I thought the Constitution guaranteed free speech, something your January 6th committee wanted to punish people for having." The moderator, sensing the escalating tension, raised a hand, a weak, almost desperate gesture. "Ladies," he began. But it was too late. The audience was already leaning forward, captivated, no longer passive observers but active participants in the unfolding drama. The first strike had landed, and the battle had truly begun. The polite facade of the Unity Forum was cracking, revealing the raw, visceral conflict beneath.
Liz Cheney, her composure momentarily fractured, fired back, her voice sharp with indignation. "You defend lawlessness and insurrection," she accused, aiming to reframe the narrative. But Karoline was already turning, not to Cheney, but to the audience, her voice rising, not in a shout, but in a sharpening, a honing of its edge. "I defend Americans who are fed up with a broken system," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the crowd. You defend the system that silences them." A few claps broke out then, tentative at first, then growing, a quiet acknowledgement that quickly swelled into a ripple of agreement. Karoline stepped deeper into her lane, sensing the shift, the palpable energy now flowing in her direction. "You call yourself a Republican," she pressed, her voice laced with controlled disdain, "but you're applauded by CNN. You say you care about democracy, but ignore the people who elected Trump twice. You're not here to save the party. You're here to burn it down for MSNBC airtime." Liz's lips tightened, a thin white line of suppressed fury. Karoline was on offense now, a relentless, unyielding assault, and the crowd felt it. They saw a young face on their screens, speaking the very words they whispered over dinner tables, the frustrations they nursed in private. This was it, a reckoning, televised, raw, and undeniable. Liz Cheney, for all her legacy and lineage, her decades in the political arena, had never been publicly challenged like this, not by someone so young, so utterly relentless. She adjusted the mic, her eyes narrowing just enough to reveal the immense pressure behind her carefully constructed composure. "Ms. Leavitt," Liz said, choosing her words like weapons, each one meant to cut deep. "You speak of loyalty to voters, but loyalty to a man above the Constitution is not patriotism. It's submission." Gasps, a collective intake of breath from the audience, the kind that signaled a line had been crossed, a boundary shattered. But Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that promised retribution. "The only thing I'm loyal to," Karoline said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming even more deliberate, "is truth. And the truth is that your kind of leadership handed the Senate to the Democrats, the White House to Joe Biden, and the base to people like me because you lost it." She leaned forward, her words a final, crushing blow. "You didn't just lose voters, Congresswoman. You lost the room." A louder reaction this time. Murmurs erupted into audible exclamations. Someone, emboldened, even shouted, "Facts!" Liz's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching. She wasn't accustomed to being outpaced in rhetoric, especially not by someone born the year her father ran the Pentagon. "I took an oath," Liz snapped back, desperation creeping into her voice. "An oath you clearly treat like a slogan." Karoline let the silence breathe, a pregnant pause that amplified her next words. "And I'd rather win for the people than grandstand for a book deal." Boom. The moderator tried to shift, to pivot, to regain some semblance of control, but he couldn't. This wasn't a panel anymore. It was a battlefield, and one side was clearly winning. From the wings, producers whispered nervously into their headsets. The live broadcast was trending. Karoline versus Cheney hit X, formerly Twitter, within 15 minutes. Clips of the exchange were already going viral, especially the part where Karoline cut Liz off with brutal surgical precision. And Karoline knew it. She wasn't just speaking to the room anymore, she was speaking to millions. She stood a little taller, her blazer sharp, her voice steady, a beacon of defiance. "You say you're saving democracy?" she projected, her words resonating with conviction. "But what you're really trying to save is your place in a system the rest of us are done obeying. The swamp doesn't clean itself. It gets drained." Even those who didn't fully agree with Karoline felt it. She owned the stage now. The moderator's voice cracked slightly as he tried to regain control. "Let's shift to party unity." But Karoline raised her hand, politely but forcefully cutting him off. "If unity means pretending Liz Cheney didn't betray the base, then maybe we don't need unity." Gasps, then scattered applause, growing in intensity. Liz bristled, her years on the Hill teaching her how to deflect, how to parry. But this wasn't a hearing. This was raw, unfiltered, and Karoline had just drawn a line in the sand, daring Liz to cross it.
Backstage during the commercial break, the air crackled with a different kind of electricity. Around both podiums, aides buzzed like frantic bees, a stark contrast in their movements. Karoline's assistant, a picture of calm efficiency, handed her a bottle of water and leaned in. "You're trending #1, she whispered, her voice barely containing her excitement. "Over 2.4 million live viewers." Karoline simply nodded once, her gaze still calm, laser-focused, already plotting the next move. In stark opposition, Liz Cheney's camp was a tableau of barely suppressed panic. One aide whispered frantically about damage control, while another was already crafting a tweet, a desperate attempt to spin the outcome, even before the debate had officially ended. Liz, seated in a green room corner, looked down at her hands, her posture tight. She had faced Democrats, presidents, committee chairs, survived countless political storms. But this felt different. Karoline hadn't attacked policy, she attacked identity, and it had landed with devastating precision. On stage, the energy never died. Even during the commercial break, the audience buzzed with an almost feverish excitement. Some immediately posted clips to social media, others debated aloud, their voices a fervent chorus. "She wrecked Liz! No mercy! She said what we all think!" Karoline stood still, her blazer perfect, the silver cross necklace at her throat catching the light. She wasn't gloating. She was waiting, coiled, ready to finish what she started. Then, the red light blinked. "We're back," the moderator announced, his voice strained. Closing remarks. Liz went first. "I have always believed," she began, her voice steady but thinner than before, a desperate attempt to reset the tone, to reclaim her narrative, that leadership means doing what's right, even when it's hard. History will remember who stood for truth. It was classic Cheney, stoic, structured, and appealed to a grander narrative, but the room didn't bite. Not like earlier. The spell had been broken. Now it was Karoline's turn. She took the mic and paused, letting the silence expand, then delivered the line that would echo for days. "Then history remembers those who win it." The crowd reacted instantly, a wave of recognition and approval. "I don't come from a famous name. I didn't inherit a political legacy. I earned everything by standing with people who were told to sit down." She walked a step forward, commanding the stage. "I'm not afraid of hard truths, but I won't let people like Liz Cheney weaponize them to silence us. This is bigger than Trump, bigger than party. This is about who owns the voice of America, the people or the elites who've ignored them for decades." Liz blinked hard once. Karoline went for the closer. Tonight wasn't about me versus Liz. It was about the old guard versus the future. And I think America just made its choice. Applause erupted again. Online, the clips lit up like wildfire. Hashtag Karoline 2028 trended. Liz's name barely flickered. Before Karoline could even leave the stage, her phone vibrated with alerts, notifications, mentions. Thousands. A viral moment was already in motion. Karoline Leavitt just handed Liz Cheney her career in a gift bag. Fire! Hashtag Live TV Massacre. This wasn't a debate, this was a transfer of power. Hashtag Karoline Dominates. A Cheney silenced by Gen Z. Historic. The debate wasn't even cold yet, and TikTok edits, YouTube shorts, and X threads were exploding with clips of Karoline's most brutal lines. Some framed it as youth versus establishment, others as truth versus legacy, but they all agreed on one thing. Karoline Leavitt had just become a political force no one could ignore. Backstage, a Fox producer approached her team. "We want her on Hannity, tonight." CNN was reaching out too, mostly in panic. One producer whispered, "We need to respond before the narrative hardens." Meanwhile, Liz Cheney left through the side exit. No cameras, no post-interview, no crowd. Her team walked behind her in silence. One aide muttered, "We'll spin this somehow." But Liz knew. Her posture said it. Her silence confirmed it. She'd underestimated the hunger out there for someone who didn't just say they fight for the people, but sounded like one of them. Karoline sat in the green room now, finally exhaling. Her husband texted, "Whatever you just did, it worked. My office can't shut up about you." She grinned slightly, not from pride, but from certainty. This wasn't just a good night. It was the night a conservative strategist messaged her. "You didn't just beat Cheney, you buried the old GOP." That idea lingered in her mind. Could this be the start of a generational pivot? Could she lead it? As she stepped out to waiting cameras, she said softly to herself, "No more silence. Not for them, not for us." And the crowd waiting by the steps, still chanting her name. By morning, the headlines were impossible to ignore. Karoline Leavitt shakes GOP foundation in Cheney Showdown. A new star rises, and an old one flickers. Gen Z conservative blasts establishment on live TV. Inside Capitol Hill offices, Karoline's name was on every screen and on every tongue. Republicans split down the middle. Half cheered her boldness. The other half worried. "Too much heat," one Senate aide warned. "She's channeling the base," another replied. "Exactly what we need." Meanwhile, Liz Cheney left through the side exit. No cameras, no post-interview, no crowd. Her team walked behind her in silence. One aide muttered, "We'll spin this somehow." But Liz knew. Her posture said it. Her silence confirmed it. She'd underestimated the hunger out there for someone who didn't just say they fight for the people, but sounded like one of them. Karoline sat in the green room now, finally exhaling. Her husband texted, "Whatever you just did, it worked. My office can't shut up about you." She grinned slightly, not from pride, but from certainty. This wasn't just a good night. It was the night a conservative strategist messaged her. You didn't just beat Cheney, you buried the old GOP. That idea lingered in her mind. Could this be the start of a generational pivot? Could she lead it? As she stepped out to waiting cameras, she said softly to herself, "No more silence. Not for them, not for us." And the crowd waiting by the steps, still chanting her name. By morning, the headlines were impossible to ignore. Karoline Leavitt shakes GOP foundation in Cheney Showdown. A new star rises, and an old one flickers. Gen Z conservative blasts establishment on live TV. Inside Capitol Hill offices, Karoline's name was on every screen and on every tongue. Republicans split down the middle. Half cheered her boldness. The other half worried. "Too much heat," one Senate aide warned. "She's channeling the base," another replied. "Exactly what we need." Meanwhile, Liz Cheney returned to Wyoming for a closed-door donor dinner. Her face was calm, but her posture was not. She'd survived political storms. Trump, January 6th, censure votes. But this felt different, because it wasn't an institution coming for her. It was the next generation. "She's dangerous," one donor whispered. "No," she replied, flatly. "She's effective." That night, Karoline delivered a live-streamed address titled, "What Comes Next?" Over 3.2 million watched within 48 hours. Dressed in a navy blue blazer, the silver cross on her collar catching the soft studio light, she began. "Some said I was just angry. Others said I was just lucky. But they all missed the truth. I'm just getting started." She walked through the failures of the past GOP establishment. She named names, and then she gave the line that would trend for days. If the old guard wants to keep their seats, they better stand up, because we're not waiting anymore. At the end, she stared directly into the lens. America doesn't need another dynasty. It needs defenders. And just like that, Karoline Leavitt had written herself into the next chapter of American politics, not as an understudy, not as an echo, but as a storm of her own making. What started as a tense debate became a national awakening. Karoline Leavitt didn't just challenge Liz Cheney, she dismantled the legacy she stood on. It was youth versus establishment, fire versus control, belief versus legacy, and in the end, the crowd chose fire. The new generation had found its voice, and it wasn't asking for permission anymore. And there you have it, the full, unvarnished account of a night that changed everything. The reverberations are still being felt, and the future of American politics is being written right now. If this story ignited something within you, if you felt the power of this moment, then don't just watch from the sidelines. Like this video, share it with your network, and comment below with your biggest takeaways. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel, because we'll continue